But so we've had a couple conversations with entrepreneurs here this morning, and you guys are looking at how do you actually support the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Grand Rapids. So can you talk to us a little bit about what Start Garden does, maybe where you came from and why it's important in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, this is a journey that goes back to 2012 and realizing that startups were leaving Grand Rapids under the idea that you had to leave in order to raise venture capital. So the first incarnation of Start Garden was trying to attack that, and we created this construct where we were essentially giving away $5,000 every week into ideas, and then we had a whole sort of stair step in which we could invest up to $500,000 to get somebody from a back of the napkin idea to a seed stage startup. And it was a process that was accessible, let's say, to everybody, but was not inclusive of everybody.
Or seemingly
accessible. Seemingly anyone could do it, but actually it was constructed so that only the people who could run the fastest, that knew all the language, that knew sort of the startup world in the way that we had imagined it, in the way that was coming to us from Silicon Valley, could participate. So about 2 years into it, we started looking around and saying, it's funny, all of our events still are just, white dudes that are into tech coming to them. Didn't we build something that was far more open than that? And we started to, really crack the hood and re-engineer the thing from the inside. We brought in Darel Ross, another director, Jorge Gonzalez. We created a flat leadership structure so that there was no, decisions that couldn't be looked at through a lens of inclusion. And restarted with a much more, I think, intentional framework of getting people going.
Yeah, and I think it's like you were saying before we went on camera, that a lot of people don't understand when you say ecosystem, it is a system. It's a lot of moving parts. It's complex, but systems also give you outcomes and results. So how do we look at the disparities that's going on, the financial inequities that's going on, and instead of looking at it like something's going wrong, look at what's going on in the system to give us these results, and understanding and accepting the fact that the system is perfectly designed to give us perfectly what we're getting, right? So how do we do system work and not just Band-Aid approaches and so forth?
For context, we, I think, are outside, next to Salt Lake City, have the highest philanthropic giving per capita of any city.
Wow, in Grand Rapids?
Oh, yeah.
And Forbes has ranked us as 51 out of 52 worst places for African Americans to live when it comes to wealth creation and entrepreneurship. How do you have those two things? We also show up on the list of best place to raise a family. It's a city of
Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of two, yeah, nailed it.
Well, and the asterisk that needs to go on all of those things,
Yeah.
right? Like the highest, per capita of philanthropy, but maybe it's not supporting all communities.
Right.
The best place to raise a family, but maybe if you're only from, the white community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, how do you actually break into those, all of, the labels and the reputations and how people talk about cities to say, but who is this city really good for? And how do we make sure that it is something that's good for everybody?
Yeah.
So what did you find? It's easy to say, okay, there was a moment.
We found something that sounded a lot like
well,
that.
there's definitely a little bit of activity happening back there. This is what happens when you are live at South by. But so you started out by saying, all right, we want this to be accessible. Mm-hmm. You found out it was accessible for some people, but not others.
Yeah.
You redid some of your structure. You brought some new team members on. But what does it take, for people who are going through the same experience of saying, we have the value of being inclusive, like this is important to us, but what we find is that we're not actually, bringing people along.
Yeah.
What are some of the tips that you say? Like, how do you actually create like an entire system that is inclusive?
I can jump in here.
Yeah,
I mean, and it sounds very cliche. One is intentionality. So I think intentionally bringing in different perspectives and holding those perspectives valid as a voice on the table with power. So when we come to the table, like everybody has a voice, and our product is sharper because of that.
And when you say with power, though, I would also jump in and say, like, there's a lot of focus on board seats and hiring, usually more at like the entry level.
Right.
And I think the real actual inclusion happens at where the decision-making power is day to day.
And then, too, it's messy. To have some patience, and I have this thing called working in white space. So if this is about going and working 9 to 5, sitting in your cubicle, showing up for meetings at 9, 10. Once you start mixing different cultures and different personalities, it gets messy compared to your strict corporate structure. So you have to be nimble, you have to be adaptable. But then again, we would argue that's what innovation takes. So if you want a cookie cutter approach and you're using words such as assimilation or the culture of our organization, once again, you have to then take a step back and realize that you're probably perpetuating some of the same things that you're getting up every day to work with. So us, like, how do we meet people where they're at? That's our pitch competitions. It may look like having them in Spanish, where the English translation is wearing a headset. It might mean going to different neighborhoods and working with community partners to make sure that the funds are easily accessible. But it also, we look at engagement as a full contact sport. So if we have an event, or if we're 100 ideas, if we're looking at data and it's not representative of the community, we don't say, oh, what's wrong with them? We have this great product. We were like, what's wrong with us? How do we do better? How do we connect? And we take that responsibility serious.
Yeah. Something we're running right now has got, I think, I want to say 40% at this point, African American participation, as far as essentially a pitch contest that's going to take place over 6 months. But I would say, I think that also you must recognize that there are people who have been uncomfortable to be around you and be in participating in your program. Right. So the natural effect of that is that you are going to have to be uncomfortable in order to make other people comfortable, right? Yeah. It's a pendulum that's either over here or over here. It doesn't.
That is funny. Yeah. Like, minorities are just as uncomfortable around some white folks as white folks
as you informed me when you first came to StartGuard.
No, but I mean, it's always, yeah.
No, but it is good, right? Like, there's not just going to be this miraculous moment that happens tomorrow where, like, everybody is all of a sudden in a place where everyone is comfortable and comes from the same perspective and sees things exactly the same way. That's why this is valuable, right? Because people do experience things differently. They do see things differently. And so looking for spaces where, how can we make sure that this community is comfortable? And it might not be optimized for another community, but then the next time you can change that balance. And as we continue shifting that around, hopefully everybody will experience, times when they feel like it's 100% for them or 80% for them, and times when it's a little bit less, but they're still part of a community of people and seeing others coming to the table comfortably for the first time.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that the talent is out there. So this isn't about lowering your standards, lowering your expectations. It's just being more intentional, methodical on finding people of color and women entrepreneurs, especially in tech. I mean, tech right now is no new inventions, right? I mean, what you want to invest in is who's applying tech to solve what problem. Increasingly, the competitive advantage then is blacks, Latinos, and women, because they're solving different problems, which is a competitive advantage. So I think a lot of times, especially when you throw in philanthropy, entrepreneurship is looked at as almost a social justice thing instead of true capital creation, removing obstacles, and connecting a real opportunity. And I think that's what we have to focus on.
So why intentionally inclusive entrepreneurship work in Grand Rapids? There's a lot of, just like you're mentioning, there's a lot of different reasons why people get involved in entrepreneurship. And why is that important for you? And what is it creating in the Grand Rapids community?
Ooh, this is a tricky one, because I would say it's going to happen in every city. We happen to be sitting in Austin. And in Austin, I think their unemployment dropped from something like 14% to 3% because it left the county, right? It's in a place now where it can't retrofit equity or an inclusion into a city that has just gone, off the rails as far as just, explosive population growth and gentrification. And so in Grand Rapids, it still feels like we can get in front of it, although it's growing really fast and housing's a real problem, and these things, we're seeing these signals. But it's just, where do you? I always think about, like, what's the place where I want to live? What's the place where I want my kids to grow up in a place that's different from where I was. Yeah.
So my last question for you before we wrap this morning is, we talked about investors are sometimes looking for a particular type of thing. And, we've spoken a lot here at the
something
Case
that looks like
about
me 20 years younger. Yeah.
Right. And from, a privileged background and a, great, Ivy League university. And there's nothing wrong with all of those things. But when our archetype of a successful entrepreneur is so narrow, then that's the only thing that investors are going to see. That's the only thing that media is going to see. And so what does a successful entrepreneur look like in Grand Rapids? Like, what do you want, investors to be looking for and saying, like, this is part of what makes entrepreneurs really great?
I think that there's something. I also say investors they go for what they look for, and that doesn't have to just be a racial lens either. It can just be, oh, this looks like that really successful company, which also immediately makes it less plausible that it's going to be successful, right? So I think it's sometimes looking for the less plausible things, or for those spaces, like Darel said. So one upside to the venture fund that we began way back in 2012 is that through, I think, largely a female that was on that team, it wound up investing in, a lot more female entrepreneurs than most, and those are the ones that are killing it.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Why?
Yeah.
They're doing something usually, that's a bit more original and more targeted toward a specific audience that has a real felt need than sort of the general, like, oh, that looks like the company that I saw in another city, but
Right. They know their market fit.
Right.
Like they
Yeah.
have an opportunity that other people aren't filling. And yeah.
The other thing is we need to realize that entrepreneurial skills are transferable, right? So we see it all the time in high tech, high growth. Although everybody wants the next Zuckerberg, if you really look at who's winning, it is the person with their third or fourth company who's been in the game, who has that experience. Unfortunately, when you're a minority entrepreneur, we don't always hold those values the same, right? We don't look at those entrepreneurial experiences as transferable. So if you open X, Y, and Z, you're always a X, Y, and Z owner. Where we know on the flip side, we're always looking for quote unquote entrepreneurs, because it's that spirit of being an entrepreneur. It's that hustle. And I would argue that just to survive as a minority, like, we're built with that hustle. And that is a competitive advantage. We just have to do a better job at connecting some of those raw skill sets to entrepreneurial opportunities. And we do it on the other side. So again, it goes back to just intentionality and connecting to real opportunity and removing obstacles.
Well, Paul, Darel, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
here
thanks for having us.
at the American Cities House at South by Southwest. Really thrilled to have you guys. Good luck with everything you're doing at Start Garden. If any of you all are in Michigan or thinking about, taking your business to Michigan, make sure to check out Start Garden and all the support that they're providing for entrepreneurs. And I hope to see you around the rest of the activities here at
We'll
South
be
by
here.
Southwest.
all right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it's 90 degrees, people in Michigan.